Well, hello there, and we are back for the 34th episode of Season 1 of the War, Sports, Politics, and Dragons podcast. As always, I am David the Nerd Emperor and will be your host. I hope you're having a great Friday. It is April the 24th, 2026, and we made it through the week. Yay! Much rejoicing. We didn't even have to eat the minstrels this time. First, let's get the standard announcements out of the way before things get going. As always, you can follow us not just on Spotify, where we began, but on Amazon, Audible, and iHeartRadio as well. Meanwhile, if you want to help us get some better tech, you can donate through our Patreon page, which I'll mention in a minute. And as I always say when I read that, don't donate through Patreon. Sponsor us through Patreon. Become a patron, and you get stuff every month. Recurring submissions. And we'll get into what those are in a moment. You can also help us out through Cash App and Venmo. Each handle is the same, WSPD Pod. We have the Patreon page. It's patreon.com/WSPDragons. That will be the home of Rule Zero Games. That is the name of the company that we're going to be creating to sell gaming products and other interesting goodness. There are t-shirts. We're talking about t-shirts too. And we're working on it. So anyway, check out the Patreon page, patreon.com/WSPDragons. The first 10 chapters of my first completed novel, Love's Crucible, are on there now. Chapter 10 went up Saturday. Chapter 11 will go up Sunday. The very first chapter is available there for free. You can become a sponsor to read the rest as it comes out. And as all my future works come out, for as little as $3 a month. $3. It's a dime a day, 10 cents a day. And you can support a writer who's been writing his whole adult life. I literally have been writing for money since I was 18 years old. There are over 24 novels in the pipeline. The list keeps growing as I keep getting more ideas. It's just a matter of each idea is 80 to 100,000 words. So the ideas will come faster than the production will, simply because of the way that works. But we're getting there. For instance, we just passed the 50,000 word benchmark on The Mustard Seed, my second novel. So that novel's going great as well. Just got to finish it. I've got it outlined. I know where we're headed with it. Just got to iron out the particulars. And that will take care of novel number 2. The thought of finishing a novel was daunting. The fact that I did it was amazing. The thought of finishing a second novel is even more amazing. And the fact that I'm getting there is really, really something. And it does my heart good. And it does my heart good to know that there are people willing to read it who have told me that they've enjoyed it. So please check out The Mustard Seed and when that comes. But first, Love's Crucible is out, and you'll get to see Mustard Seed once Love's Crucible is done. But that's enough of that. It's time for the show. Not delving deeply into war. I think the ceasefire is still going on, isn't it? I don't remember. I don't know. It's all a blur. In any event, the IRGC's top diplomat has headed to Pakistan as of just shortly ago today for talks with the US again. Now, of course, they're 8.5 hours, 9 hours ahead of us there. So at the time I record this, it's high noon on Friday. So he got there around dark. And they'll be talking over the weekend. In domestic news, it's somewhat related to the war. President Trump has extended his waiver of the Jones Act for a further 90 days, extending the 60-day waiver that he originally issued out. And what the Jones Act is it's a maritime, I think it's called the Maritime Protection Act of 1920. Let me double check it here. The Merchant Marine Act of 1920. There we go. And what it did was it basically said that if you're going to travel from a U.S. port to a U.S. port to carry goods or cargo, that you had to be in a vessel that was made in America, at least 75% owned in America, and crewed by U.S. citizens. Well, as time has gone on, that has become increasingly less of a thing, and because of it, there's been a slow deterioration in the amount of domestic shipping available for inland waterways, like, for instance, the Mississippi River. And in light of everything going on in the world, Trump has waived the Jones Act And I don't know if other presidents have. I want to say other presidents have. I just don't have a lot of the particulars on that handy right now because I'm just talking about this particular moment. I will look into that though. So let me put a pin in that, and we'll come back to discussing it. Proponents say that the law protects 500,000 jobs and supports U.S. shipyards, and that's all well and good. But then when they're trying to regulate domestic, production of large items like ships out of existence incrementally over the decades with this or that regulation and this or that wage law and this or that labor law, the number of ships has been declining. But they also think that what this means is it leads to using more trucks and trains for freight, causing higher emissions into the environment. So there are two cogent sides to that argument. I'm not terribly in favor of the Jones Act myself, but that's neither here nor there. So moving on to our next subject, we're going to go into a post that I read off of actually Facebook from a page called The History Today, and it's about tech stuff. I didn't know where else to put it, so I put it under war for our war on ignorance. I don't know. But here we go. August 10th, 1937, at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. A 21-year-old submitted his master's thesis in electrical engineering. The title was dry and technical and almost aggressively forgettable. Nobody outside the department paid any attention. It was just another grad student completing another degree requirement. That thesis would become the foundation, however, of the entire digital age. The submitter's name was Claude Shannon. He had grown up in Gaylord, Michigan, a small town where he built model planes, tinkered with radios, and delivered telegraph messages for Western Union as a teenager. Back then, emails were called telegraphs, and you got to pay someone to tap them out on a machine, and they were delivered to the destination that you had set up, and someone then transcribed all the dots into English via Morse code, and then someone was handed the telegram, and it might have been put in an envelope. I don't know how it was done, but they were, Western Union boys were everywhere back then, and a lot of them during the war had the largely thankless job of delivering Western Union death notices to some of the families. Now, a lot of them, but not all, were delivered by uniformed service members or local clergy or both, but there were a number of people who received a telegram telling them that their son, their brother, their cousin, their husband had died in the war via a kid in a Western Union uniform. But in any event, talking about Claude Shannon, he loved puzzles. He loved taking things apart to understand how they worked. He loved the elegance of mathematics, the way some people love music. And it's my understanding, by the way, that people who are big into music tend to be better at math and vice versa. So there is a correlation there. Anyway, in college, he took a philosophy course on symbolic logic and encountered the work of George Boole, B-O-O-L-E, a 19th century English mathematician who had developed a system of algebra built entirely on the prospect of true and false, yes and no, 1 and 0. Now, Boole died in 1864. His ideas had been sitting largely unused for nearly 100 years. Most people considered Boolean algebra interesting theoretical mathematics, beautiful perhaps, but utterly impractical. It was a curiosity with no real-world application that anyone could discern. But Shannon looked at it and saw something nobody else had seen. Electrical circuits operate the same way. A switch is either closed or open. Electricity either flows or it does not. It's on or it's off. It's 1 or it's 0. What if you could design circuits to perform logical operations using these switches? He did not yet have the tools to prove it, but the connection had been made inside his mind, and it would not leave him alone. After graduation, he enrolled at MIT and took a job maintaining an early analog computer built by the brilliant engineer Vannevar Bush. The machine was enormous, over 100 switches, multiple operators. Circuitry of breathtaking complexity had been designed entirely through trial and error, built by engineers who kept adding components until the thing worked. with no underlying mathematical framework guiding any of it. Everyone else saw a functioning machine, but Shannon saw chaos, and he figured there had to be a better way. The following summer, he worked at Bell Telephone Labs in New York, where engineers were designing telephone switching systems using thousands of electromechanical relays. They were all built the same way that the MIT machine had been built, through experimentation and intuition. It was an art rather than an exact science. But Shannon, he kept thinking about George Boole. Boolean algebra had three basic operations, and meaning both things must be true, or meaning at least one must be true, or not, meaning the opposite. Shannon realized you could build all three with electrical switches. An AND operation put two switches in sequence. Both must be closed for electricity to flow. An OR operation put them in parallel. Either one being closed lets electricity through. A NOT operation, a switch that opens when activated. Now, I remember from 8th grade science class that we learned how to wire light bulbs in series and in parallel. And in series, the way it worked was the wire went to light bulb A, and then it went to light bulb B, and then it went to light bulb C, and then it went to light bulb D, and then it went to light bulb E. When you did it that way, if any of them disconnected, anything farther downstream from the source of the power was also disconnected. So if you disconnected light bulb A, all 5 light bulbs went dark. If you disconnected E, only that one would go dark. If you disconnected C, C, D, and E would go dark. But then we learned how to wire in parallel. And basically what parallel meant was you had 2 wires running to each side of the light bulb's circuit. So one bypassed it and went to the next one, and one went directly to it. So the way it worked was if one of the light bulbs went out, the rest of them still had power because there was an alternate flow source. And that to me was kind of cool. And this is basically the same general principle, but scaled up a little bit bigger. Okay, so now suddenly Boolean algebra was not theoretical anymore. It was a blueprint. And any logical operation, no matter how complex, could be broken down into combinations of AND, OR, and NOT. And any combination of those 3 operations could be built with switches, which meant you could build a circuit to perform any logical task that would be expressed in language. Logic could become physical, thought could become mechanical, and problems could become computable. You see where this is headed? You could build a machine that thinks. Shannon returned to MIT buzzing with the idea. Vannevar Bush listened, recognized what he was hearing immediately, and told his graduate student to put it in his thesis. Shannon spent the following months writing 85 dense, technical, diagram-filled pages that would quietly revolutionize human civilization. He submitted the thesis at age 21. It won a prestigious engineering prize. A handful of people in the electrical engineering community read it carefully and understood its importance. It did not make headlines. It did not change the world overnight, because nobody yet fully grasped what Shannon had actually done. What he had done was this. He had invented the theoretical foundation for digital computing. Every computer, every smartphone, every smart chip, every digital device that exists today is built on the principles outlined in those 85 pages. Every circuit in every digital device uses Boolean logic gates to process information. Shannon showed how to build them. He showed how to combine them. He showed how to represent any problem as a series of binary choices and solve it with circuits. During the Second World War, his ideas spread through the engineering community. The pioneers building early computers used his thesis as their guide. Circuit designs finally had a rigorous mathematical foundation. Instead of guessing, engineers could calculate. Hermann Goldstein, one of the pioneers of computing, later wrote that Shannon's thesis was surely one of the most important master's theses ever written, helping to transform digital circuit design from art to science. Scientific American magazine eventually called that thesis the Magna Carta of the information age. But Shannon didn't stop there. In 1948, he published a paper that founded information theory, introducing the concept of the bit as the fundamental unit of information and laying the theoretical groundwork for everything, from data compression to internet protocols to digital communications. But his master's thesis remained his most consequential work, because without it, there are no digital computers, there are no microprocessors, there is no internet, no smartphones, no streaming, no search engines, none of it. In between the world-changing work, Shannon rode a unicycle through the halls of Bell Labs while juggling. He built a mechanical mouse that could solve mazes. He created a machine called the Ultimate Machine, and everybody has seen this machine. It's a box with a switch on top of it. When the switch is flipped, it would open to reveal a mechanical hand that reached out and flipped the switch back off and then closed again. That was his sense of humor. The world was a playground for ideas, and he refused to be contained by the boundaries of any single discipline. Claude Shannon died on February 24th, 2001, age 84. By then, billions of people were using computers, mobile phones, and the internet every single day, all of it running on principles he had written down in a graduate thesis 64 years earlier. Most of them had never heard his name. Personally, I had only heard it once or twice and didn't know much of the specifics about it until I read this piece. His work was invisible, buried in the circuitry, woven into the fundamental architecture of the digital world. You can see Boolean logic gates. You cannot see Boolean logic gates. You cannot point to information theory. But every time you send a message, stream a film, make a phone call, or read words on a screen, or listen to this podcast, you are using Claude Shannon's ideas. He did not invent a device. He did not build a machine. He made a connection between two things nobody had thought to connect: a Victorian mathematician's forgotten algebra and a 20th century engineer's relay circuits. One insight, 85 pages from a 21-year-old, and the world has never been the same since. God bless those who connect the dots that no one else can see. And that's the big story for today. A little bit of information about the man who is pretty much the godfather, the grandfather maybe, of the information age. Really a fascinating, quick story to read there about Claude Shannon. And you got to salute the man. He gave us a lot of what we have today, without us even knowing it. But moving on to sports now. In light of what's going on with the Orioles and the fact that football is off season, I don't follow basketball worth a damn, because to me the sport's not worth a damn. The pro sport isn't. I got to level with you. In light of an event that happened Sunday, I might just become a NASCAR guy. I don't know for sure. And here's why. Is Sunday I was visiting a friend, an elderly fellow, and I was house sitting with him basically. He's not in great health. He's been battling. He's been battling some illnesses. And I was there just, in case he needed somebody. I was kind of there as an emergency assistant. I didn't do much assisting. He was fine. And we sat there all day chatting. And, of course, when you talk to one of your elders, if you actually listen to what they have to say, some of them have the most amazing stories. And this man, we'll call him Mr. Phil. Mr. Phil had some amazing stories to tell, because he's 20 years older than me. He grew up in a very rural area of Maryland, around Hooper's Island in southern Dorchester County. And, some of the stuff he was telling me, particularly misadventures with automobiles and boats and things like that, and a little bit of local history of people that were from the area and what they did. It was fascinating. But the NASCAR thing, here's how it happened, is I'm going to refer to these people as Racer 1, Racer 2, and Racer 3. In Sunday's race in Kansas, it was a 400-mile race on a 1.5-mile track, which meant they took 267 laps. And unlike when I was watching NASCAR as a kid, the races are now divided up into stages. You can win a stage of a race and earn a significant number of points, even if you don't win the race at the end. So what they do is when the stage is about to end, they'll pull out the yellow flag, and everybody will basically take a break, hit the pits, reset the field, and then they'll start the next stage. And then at the end of that, there will be another caution flag, and then they'll do the third stage after that. Well, in the third stage, the first racer, and I think it was Denny Hamlin, was leading the race for much of the day. He had led most of the laps, I believe. And he was leading as the lap count wound down, and as we got into single digits of laps left. Now, mind you, it was taking the leader at the race Sunday about 31 to 32 seconds to complete a lap on the 1.5 mile course. Okay? You can do the math on how fast that means they were going. But they were rolling. They were doing well in excess of 150 miles an hour. So, well, NASCAR now has statistics for everything. Okay, I didn't realize just how stat-heavy the sport had become in recent years. When I was looking and watching the race, they were showing not just the interval of time between the lead racer and all the other racers. They were showing all kinds of statistics, just everything you could imagine having to do with the race, and like, you know, how many tires each guy got on their last stop at the pits, and how many laps that each racer had on their particular set of tires. They even ranked the pit crews in terms of their speed and the ability of a racer to improve his position in the pack of cars based on how quick the pit crew could get him fuel and new rubber. So it's a fascinating little bit of statistics for a numbers nerd like me. So as the race wore down, though, Hamlin's lead began to deteriorate. It was 4.5 seconds, then it was 3 seconds, then it was 2.1, then it was 1.9, then it was 1.4. And as we got down to a point where there were only 3 or so laps left, the second place racer passed him and took over the lead. Well, within seconds of doing that, someone announced on the comms between racers and pit crews, he's out of gas. He's out of gas. Or it might have been that racer himself saying it. And he had to switch to, I guess they have like a backup emergency tank. I don't know. I thought they only had one. But he was apparently switching to his reserve. And in the process, scraped the wall. Well, with all that going on, he lost his lead and Hamlin took the lead again. Well, mind you, there are only 2 laps left in the race. Okay? So in 1 minute and 10 seconds, tops, this race is over. An interesting note is that to that point, through 265 laps, there had not been what they call a caution for cause in the entire race. What that means specifically is they had cautions to signify the ends of the stages, but there were no yellow flags out at any other point due to anybody spinning out or crashing or having mechanical trouble or anything like that. There were no other cautions for cause to that point. Well, Hamlin takes the lead and begins to pull away. In a matter of seconds, he went from being behind 1/2 second to being ahead 1/2 second and pulling away as the number 2 car was trying to catch up to him, having lost some speed for a while due to not having fuel and having to switch to his alternate or whatever. Well, for the first time in the whole race, a caution popped up because somebody spun out on turn 4, finishing a lap. And the field had to reset. And when you have a caution in NASCAR, everybody comes back up to, they basically form another pack of cars behind the pace car. And they ride around for a few laps until the obstacle or issue is resolved on the racetrack. And then they start over. Well, it's so close to the end that what the rule is, basically, is that any flag after that green flag drops to signify a restart of the race, the next flag is going to be the checkered flag, period. So, with 2 laps left to go, Hamlin and the number 2 racer come out neck and neck. And, oh look, bang, here's a third guy coming out of nowhere practically, taking the lead and pulling away. But in the final analysis, in the end, the number 2 racer behind Hamlin, the one who took the lead and fell back due to fuel issue, I can't remember his name off the top of my head. And sorry, I didn't take notes. I will. Ended up winning the race. So Hamlin finished something like 3rd or 4th Sunday after leading almost the whole thing and coming literally 1 minute away from a victory. And it was a good race to watch, even though I'll admit it, I'm like most people that watch NASCAR. We watch it for the crashes and hope nobody gets hurt. Okay? Nobody really watches it for, or at least that was my opinion at one point, that nobody really watches it for the strategy and everything. But I tell you, I watched it with an open mind as an adult, and a whole new world opened up to me watching that race. It really did. It's fascinating. It's not just 42 guys riding around in a circle. Ooh, we made another left turn. No, that's not how it is at all. And I never disliked NASCAR, but now I really like it. So Dustin, my former coworker and big NASCAR guy who taught me what little I do know now about modern NASCAR, thank you. And we'll be talking. So please give me a shout whenever you have a chance, and we will go over it again. Haven't talked to you in like a week. So, yep, there's my sports story for the day. We're not going to talk about the Orioles because we're going to wait and see what happens with this weekend series of 3 games against Boston, and then they've got 3 right after that. I think that's also at home against the Houston Astros. And the Red Sox and Astros are both last place in their respective divisions. So, like I said, the over-under for Baltimore wins had better be at least 4. If they don't take at least 4 of those 6 games, then they're not a serious team. And while I've officially written them off, I can definitively just go ahead and put them on the dustbin, if they don't win 4 out of 6 there, because they're just not a serious team. And they've had almost a month so far, as have other teams, and you can't keep wasting months getting your crap together when you play. So there's that. Moving on into politics now. Real quick, the rotisserie chicken debate rages. Sarah Huckabee Sanders, who's the governor of Arkansas, and daughter, I believe, of former governor of Arkansas, Mike Huckabee, who had some job, I want to say, in the W. Bush administration, but I can't remember what it is off the top of my head, has proposed a change to SNAP to allow hot foods such as, and it might just be, rotisserie chicken to be served to SNAP recipients. I'm wholly opposed to this. Rotisserie chicken has a lot of added chemicals to it. It costs 40% more per pound than regular chickens do, at least according to the 2 grocery stores I checked in my town. And no, because that will pave the way for allowing SNAP for fast food. And there are already people that are doing that to some degree, because I know for a fact that there are DoorDash deliveries that we took that were SNAP or EBT, because when we made the delivery, we had to get a PIN number from the person who received the delivery, because that was their EBT card PIN number. Now, granted, a lot of it was grocery stuff, and naturally, whenever we delivered a grocery order that had a PIN number, there was no friggin' tip involved, because, I won't get into that. But yeah, no. My final answer on rotisserie chicken with SNAP is no, and we're going to leave it at that. And if you don't like it, then you can go out there and you can buy all the tizzy chickens you want, and you can go through whatever neighborhoods you want that are low income, and you can knock on doors and hand out all the tizzy chickens you want. But I'm not going to volunteer to pay for it with my tax dollars, and don't believe yours should go toward it either. SNAP stands for Supplemental Nutritional Assistance Program. It does not stand for someone needs a pie or someone needs all Popeyes. It stands for Supplemental Nutritional Assistance Program. It's to supplement, not to totally replace and comprise entirely your dietary choices. Okay? You can still go get Coke. You can still go get M&Ms and Doritos and all that other junk, but you just got to pay for it with money you have cash. And if you don't have any cash money, then I would recommend you figure out a way to acquire some through legal means. Okay? That's that, and that's my standpoint, and I'm sticking with it, and I know a majority of people who listen are going to agree. Paying people not to work will only make people not want to work. And food would be cheaper if 44 million people weren't getting it for free. Okay? Think about that. Moving on to dragons and gaming and all that good stuff. We've got a couple of quick ones. One's going to be a real humdinger, and there is a language warning for this episode because, yeah. Anyway, first subject under dragons is the 30-day D&D challenge. We're doing day 8 now. Favorite player character of your own creation. My favorite player character would have to be Templeton Algrith that I created when I was in middle school. It was maybe one of the first 15 or 20 characters I'd created. And he was known as Templeton the Sensible. He was a half-elf in honor of Elrond of Rivendell from The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. and he became a fighter slash magic user slash cleric. He was a jack of all trades. He was known as Templeton the Sensible because he always had a reasonable way to do things. Basically, my way of describing him would have been if Spock and Gandalf got spliced together and made into a character in D&D. You know, incredibly intelligent, strong user of logic, very deductive in his reasoning, and knew his stuff. My second favorite, of course, would be Elnish Arundel, my very first player character, an elf who, in advanced D&D, became a fighter slash magic user slash thief, because that way he could do everything. And that's the 30-day D&D challenge. We'll do day 9 on Monday. We've got 22 days left to go in that, so that's actually going to get spread out over, 11 more weeks, I guess. But the next one. Those of you who have watched any of the Lord of the Rings movies may be aware that the Fellowship of the Ring, at least, is rated PG-13. And the way PG-13 rated films are, it might be PG, but I think it's PG-13. The way PG-13 and PG films are, you're allowed to have one F-bomb in the movie. You can say the word fuck once in a movie that's rated PG-13. Where would you put the F-bomb in the Fellowship of the Ring? Do you put it at the beginning, where Frodo and Gandalf are talking, and Frodo says to Gandalf, fine, keep your fucking secrets then? Do you change one line from Bilbo Baggins' dialogue, and when he yells to an assembled 144 friends and well-wishers, he says, today is my 11th fucking birthday? Do you move the F-bomb to the portion of the early Fellowship where Aragorn is leading the hobbits through marshes riddled with mosquitoes, and one of the hobbits exclaims, what the fuck do they eat when they're not eating a hobbit? Do you do it at the meeting at Rivendell when Frodo stands up and says, I will take it. I will take the fucking ring to Mordor. But I do not know the way. Or, but I do not know the fucking way. Do you put it there? Do you put it in the mines of Moria? Or, wait a minute, do you put it at the entrance to the mines of Moria before the simple solution of speak friend and enter is discovered? Does Gandalf yell out fuck at one point in Elvish in disgust at not being able to figure out what the command word is to open the back door of Moria? Do you put it in Moria itself when Boromir proclaims or announces in disgust, they have a fucking cave troll? Now that personally is my favorite, and I thank my best friend Gene for that idea, because I think that might be our winner. There are a number of other places where we could put it. Galadriel has a couple of very cool chances to drop an F-bomb. At the fight at the river when the hobbits get separated from the rest of the Fellowship, and Merry and Pippin are taken by the Uruk-hai, and Sam follows Frodo into Mordor, the scene just as the Uruk-hai are approaching, and Aragorn notices that Frodo's sword is glowing blue because there are orcs nearby, and he says, run! Fucking run! Could that be where he says it? So that's the question I want answered. Just, if you would, put it in your replies when you make a comment on the podcast. But as it stands right now, I think they have a fucking cave troll. Might just be our grand prize winner today. Now we're going to move on to anecdotal evidence and the infamous lamb and cheese sandwich incident of March 1988. So I'm a senior in high school. It's the first week or so of March 1988, and I am a member of the cast of the senior class play. I don't know what it was like at your high school, but at my high school, every year the seniors would put on a play in March. They would do several months of rehearsals. Then they would have one dress rehearsal, which they performed in front of the middle school So every year, if you were in 6th, 7th, or 8th grade at North Dorchester Middle, one day in March, you got to go to the high school and watch a play. After the dress rehearsal, the seniors would then put on 3 performances that sold tickets. And I believe, I forget what that fundraised towards. It wasn't toward the prom, because the juniors were responsible for fundraising for the prom, which, when I was in high school, was the second week of May. I don't know if it was to cover graduation costs or whatever the hell they might be, but in any event, it was you'd buy $3 or $4 for a ticket back in the 80s, and you'd go see the senior class play. Well, our play was this horrible, garbage, early 50s slop called No Boys Allowed. It was written by a woman named Jean Provence, and it's about a jilted ex-boyfriend attempting to infiltrate a girl's slumber party to convince the girlfriend who just dumped him to take him back because of a misunderstanding. There are other protagonists involved, another guy who's a suitor for the same girl's affections, and then there's also a burglar in the show, and if you read it, it's fairly funny. If you act it out, it's okay, but it was written in 1951, so even in 1988, it was horribly out of date, and it, wasn't a good play, and it was actually a play selected after the original play was started and dropped. We had begun rehearsal on a play called Drood, which was the unfinished Mystery of Edwin Drood, written by Edgar Allan Poe, and it was unfinished because he died before he completed it. Poe was a bit of a drinker, and he died fairly young. I want to say he was in his 40s when he passed. But we were doing that play, but some of the subject matter included things like drug use and transvestitism, and there were a number of themes in that play that weren't considered suitable for our high school audience. For instance, when I auditioned, the cold read I did was of a man experiencing hallucinations after just doing opium in an opium den. Okay? So that wasn't terribly suited to 15 to 16-year-olds and middle schoolers actually watching it. So they ended up dumping that and going with another play, and that was No Boys Allowed, and it was terrible. But the Drood thing actually had multiple possible endings. As I recall, I think it had multiple possible endings that the audience could vote on. And then the actors would have to act out that alternate ending, vaguely similar to the 1985 movie Clue, which had 3 different endings. Anyway, so one of the scenes involves myself playing a character named Fred, and my sidekick, a character named Leroy, who was played by my childhood friend, still a friend, he lives out west, named Jason. And Jason and I, Fred and Leroy, had stolen all the sandwiches from the girls' slumber party and were sitting on the couch eating the sandwiches. Well, little did I know, someone had tampered with my sandwich. Now, when I was younger, as in middle to late elementary school and into early middle school, so from, say, 3rd to 7th grade, I had a lady watch me whose name was Lenny. We called her Aunt Lenny. She's a sweetheart. I think she's still alive. Still lives in my old hometown of Hurlock. Wonderful lady. I guess she's pushing 80 now. Well, I wasn't the only child that she watched. She had her own son that she watched, and then a nephew and a couple of nieces from down the street, and then there were 3 or 4 other kids from the neighborhood that she watched as part of her daycare. I was in a group known as the big kids because I was, several years older than the so-called little kids who were all toddlers or preschoolers. And I used to hate lunches there sometimes, though, because the little kids had this amazing ability to spill Kool-Aid on the table while we were eating lunch and get Kool-Aid all over my sandwich. Because of that memory, until just a few years ago, after a number of years of being married, I never ate what are called hot sandwiches, like a hot roast beef sandwich where you take some bread and then you put roast beef on it and then you pour gravy on it. I didn't like those sandwiches because it reminded me of a 4-year-old spilling Kool-Aid on my bologna and cheese sandwich, and it used to piss me off so bad because I couldn't eat the sandwich. I can't eat bread that was soggy and tasted like Kool-Aid. So I ended up not even eating the sandwiches and missed a number of lunches because of them doing that nonsense. But it was like they were almost trying to do it on frickin' purpose. It happens so often. But it wasn't Lenny's fault. It was just, the nature of having small children around who apparently had all the dexterity of a cat with 2 legs. But moving forward, as a result of that series of recurring incidents in my younger childhood, I developed the habit of always checking my sandwich before I bit into it to make sure that it wasn't soggy or otherwise ruined. Well, I looked at my cheese. They were just regular old cheese sandwiches with mayo, I believe. Well, I opened mine up to look at it as we sit on the couch about to eat. Now, this was not during one of the performances. This was during one of the rehearsals. I looked on the sandwich, and on my cheese sandwich, someone had put a lambskin condom on it. I don't know who it was, and I'm naming names as to who I think it might have been. It was either Drew Sturmer or Greg Collins. Unfortunately, those 2 gentlemen are not available to defend themselves because they both passed on. I found out, sadly, that over the course of the years that they both died fairly young. I'll get into their circumstances later on. But I liked those dudes. We were friends. We were buds. And doing play practice together, we had a lot of fun times. But that was just messed up. Well, after the practice, Drew walked up to me, or maybe it was Greg, I forget now. It was one of the 2, and said, "Hey, Dave, how was that lamb and cheese sandwich?" You son of a bitch. That was all I could say. You son of a bitch. And I'm still a little leery of my sandwiches to this day because of that. But there is one final note to the play, and then I'll talk about Drew and Greg. The final note to the play is when we did the dress rehearsal before the middle school, and we got to the scene where, Fred and Leroy sat down to eat the sandwiches, I pulled my sandwich out of the bag and got a horrible case of the giggles. And the whole play got disrupted for about 45 seconds because I got laughing so hard, thinking about what Greg and or Drew had done to my sandwich during rehearsal a few days prior, that I just totally lost my composure, to the point where Jason, playing Leroy, had to improvise some lines and got us out of that particular pickle. Thank God for his ad-libbing, because otherwise I might still be sitting there on the stage in the auditorium at that high school laughing. Well, I don't know if that's entirely true. They demolished the high school a number of years ago and built a new one. But you understand my point. I might have laughed the whole evening. It was, I just got to, when you get a case of the giggles, man, the worst place, it happens at the worst places, at the worst possible times. You ever get giggles at a funeral? I haven't gotten that yet, but people have, and it can be pretty damn embarrassing. But that was the story of the lamb and cheese sandwich. Now I want to talk about Greg and Drew real quick. Back around 2002, I had been working at Domino's Pizza doing deliveries in Cambridge, and made a delivery to a house, and the woman who answered the door, I immediately recognized as Danielle, Drew's older sister. Drew and I were class of 88. I think Danielle was class of 1986. Well, when I recognize somebody, I immediately say, "Hey, you remember me? I'm David," and we would talk. Well, I introduced myself to her, and I said, "So how's Drew doing?" And she said, "Oh, he died of a brain aneurysm." I think that's what she said it was. It was a brain aneurysm or a stroke or something. And I was crushed. I didn't know what to say. What do you say? What do you say when you run into the sister of an old friend you haven't seen in 14 years, and you ask, "How is so-and-so?" and that sister says, "So-and-so's dead." And I felt horrible. I felt bad for bringing it up, but I had no way of knowing, and I apologized profusely. She was, actually, decent about it. There's only so many things you can say, and he died of a brain aneurysm or something like that, fairly young. It had been a couple of years, as a matter of fact, since he had passed. So I don't know if Drew lived to be 30. And that kind of broke my heart at the time. Well, oddly, the previous year, in 2001, Greg had been working as a correctional officer at Eastern Correctional Institute. Now, that is technically in Westover, Maryland, but realistically, it's in Princess Anne, Maryland. It has a Westover address, but it's closer to Princess Anne than it is to the infinitesimally small town of Westover, which is really just a post office and 3 or 4 houses on Route, 413, that'll take you to Crisfield, down in Somerset County, Maryland. Well, Greg was working at ECI as a correctional officer, and one night in 2001, after having worked an overtime shift, so he'd probably just put in a 12-hour day, he was driving home, and I believe he was living either in Rhodesdale or Brookview or Hurlock, somewhere in northern Dorchester County. He had stayed local, like a lot of us did, and a shot rang out, and he was killed. Well, it took 18 years to solve his murder, but it was solved. And the man who did it, who was a convicted felon, had done it on contract, basically, for someone who was an inmate at ECI over some perceived grudge that they had against Greg while he was working as a correctional officer. Now, I can remember for a brief period, I worked as the manager of the kitchen at the Dorchester County Correctional Facility in Cambridge, the county jail. I managed a crew of, I think there were a total of 14 inmates, and there were 2 supervisors who were employees of, I don't know if you guys have ever heard of the company called Aramark. Aramark is a concession stand company. They do stadium concessions at sporting events, things like that. Well, they have a corrections division, and they have contracts with a number of correctional facilities all over the country where they provide breakfast, lunch, and dinner for inmates at different correctional facilities. So I've technically worked for Aramark. I didn't work for the county government. It was a contractual thing. And I had technically 2 employees under me that were Aramark employees, and then a crew of 7 inmates that worked the breakfast and, let me think, the morning crew did breakfast, and then the afternoon crew came in for lunch and dinner. And lunch was always sandwiches that were served cold. We didn't do a hot lunch because there was no air conditioning in the county lockup. So it would have gotten too hot if we had run a third hot meal. But I remember working for Aramark, doing that briefly, and I remember during my training, the point I'm trying to get to is, when I first came in, they pulled me aside on day 1 along with a fellow I knew who happened also to be named Greg. Obviously a different Greg. He was a Cambridge guy, whereas Greg was a North Dorchester guy. The other Greg was a North Dorchester guy. Pulled us into a classroom, made us watch a whole bunch of videos about basically how to conduct ourselves while we were in the county jail. And one of the things that they hammered home on us repeatedly was, do not give any information out about yourself or your family or anything you do outside of the correctional facility. Well, I had just worked 14 years as a sports writer for a local paper. My picture had been in the paper every week, basically, for 14 years. And some of the inmates turned out to have been athletes whom I had covered and personally interviewed. Heck, one of the correctional officers had 2 kids whom I had covered. Now, they weren't inmates, but everyone knew me. So it was damn hard for me to do that. But I know that it was hard for the other ones too, because people like to talk. People like to communicate with one another, and we're social animals. And you never know when you say something that somebody could take advantage of. Like, for instance, my dad and stepmom used to rent out a house to a man who was a correctional officer. And on the day before he and his wife were supposed to go on vacation, some guys showed up at the house, pretended that their vehicle had broken down in the entrance to his driveway, and then when he went out to help them, They robbed him and stole all the money that he had saved for his vacation because he let slip that he was going on vacation. And word got around, and some people talked to some people who talked to some people, and somebody came by and robbed him blind that day. So don't go thinking that these people in correctional facilities are these poor little lost lambs who are just being treated badly by society. There are people in there who have made honest mistakes, who've done dumb crap, won't do it again, and are there to serve a little bit of time and learn their lesson and move on with their lives. Then there are other people, well, as someone once said, God makes some clay pots just to break them. These are those people. These are people who are inherently bad or evil people, and they don't wish anyone else well. They only exist for their own amusement and satisfaction, and they don't care who they hurt or kill in the process. Those are the true socio and psychopaths in our society, and thankfully a lot of them are locked up. But that's going to end anecdotal evidence. They did eventually, as I said, find Greg's murderer and arrested him in 2019. He was convicted in 2021. I'm not even going to name the son of a bitch because he's not worthy of being named. But he got put away for life plus 20 years without the possibility of parole. So he will never harm another person again. Greg left behind, by the way, a 5-month-old daughter. So he had a little girl who was a year younger than my oldest. And it breaks my heart. Because Greg was a funny guy. He was a nice dude. He was an honest, hard-working fellow. He was a veteran. And because some scumbag at a prison got pissed off at him, they felt it was necessary to destroy a family. There is evil in the world, folks. Okay? And you need to recognize it. Because if you don't, you will fall victim to it. And that's going to be a great segue into our final thought for the day. And that is very simply, if you think it's okay for Iran to have nukes, but it's not okay for your neighbor to have a gun, you're part of the problem, and you're on the wrong side of history. Okay? Stop forgiving evil because you dislike whoever's in charge right now. Never side with evil to spite good, because that makes you evil too. Okay? And we're going to leave it at that. Make sure to follow this show on Twitter. The handle is at the WSPD Podcast. More stuff is coming. There's not enough time in the day. We've got a lot going on. Like I said, you can help sponsor us through our Patreon page. It's patreon.com/WSPDragons. WSPD Pod is our Cash App and Venmo if you want to help us out and help us cover expenses and get some better equipment, like, for instance, stuff for video. I need a set of headphones, for instance, that kind of thing. You can send help through Cash App or Venmo as well, but I'd really rather you sponsor us through Patreon, because that way I'm giving you something in return. I don't really like handouts. I'd rather earn it. But as always, you can hear us on Spotify, where we began. Please follow us there, as well as iHeartRadio, Audible, and Amazon. This is Dave the Nerd Emperor. After our officially longest podcast, the previous episode, we're coming in at under an hour this time. So thanks for your time. Have a great weekend. It's going to be lovely here on the eastern shore of the People's Republic of Maryland. I hope you guys have a good time. We will talk again Monday. And please check us out on Patreon. Thanks for your time.